The crowd I expected in silence. It was the evening in which the world would meet the new spiritual leader of more than 1 billion souls. Cameras focused her balcony, voices prayed, others they recorded with their phones. And suddenly, the curtain moved. A white figure appeared, and with she, a name that would resonate like an ancient echo. Leon. It was not a name any. The media wondered. Why Leo XIV? What message, what was hidden behind that symbolic roar? Was it an allusion to power, a spiritual marketing strategy? No, nothing of the sort. What the world didn't know, and what you're about to discover, is that this Pope chose his name after a vision, an experience so profound that, according to, he was more real than the reality same. In she is Saint Peter, the first apostle, appeared, and he whispered in my ear, "The lion roars to wake up." Since then, his mission, it was clear. He did not come to please. He came to shake, to awaken a sleeping world, anesthetized by the comfort, by relativism, and by a superficial spirituality. This video is not a biography, nor is it a critique. It is an invitation. Because what the Pope has begun to reveal in its early days, homilies and meetings, in brief phrases, in intense glances, in seemingly simple gestures, has the power to transform how you understand God and how you understand yourself. Did you know that the new Pope has said that the world's biggest spiritual problem is not a lack of faith, but a forgetting of who we are? Have you heard his criticism of the own church? Have you felt the weight of his phrase, God not only loves, God is love? What you are about to see is more than a message. It's an inner revolution, a call that doesn't ring in the temples but in the depths of the soul. Because sometimes, when everything seems to be fine in the surface, is when we are most lost inside. And then the lion roars. Before becoming in Pope, it was simply a man, a shepherd of souls, silent, observant, someone who walked among the poor without cameras, which he spent hours in worship without say word. But it was in one night, solitary, in a monastic cell of the southern Italy, when everything changed. The vision was not a dream any. He same the described as a more vivid experience than the dawn. It was in a space without time, in front of a stone door ancient. On the other side, a figure, it looked, piercing eyes, fisherman's face, a key in the hand. It was Saint Peter. Without moving his lips, I'm listening say, "The lion roars to awaken those who are asleep." And then everything shook. Inside, something broke and was rebuilt at the same time. He woke up soaked in sweat, with an unshakable certainty. It had to be that one lion, not one who devours, but one who roars so that the flock does not fall in the abyss of spiritual oblivion. He chose his name not out of pride, but out of obedience. "I can't shut up," he said to those closest to him. "Shut up now, I would betray the living gospel." The symbolism of the lion is not new. In the scriptures, the lion represents both Christ, the Lion of Judah, and the prophetic voice crying out in a desert. In early Christian art, the lion appears as a guardian of the sacred, as a sign of vigilance and divine strength, and that is the archetype that he has decided to embody, the awakened prophet. Not a distant ruler, but a living conscience that disturbs, that shakes, that risks. Since then his life changed. His prayer became fire, his gaze more penetrating, his words sharp but tender, as if would not speak from the doctrine, but from a flame that burns within. One of his first gestures as Pope was to eliminate certain luxury protocols. "The lion does not need a throne," he said. "His roar is heard from the ground." He preferred stay in a room simple, visit prisons before cathedrals, wash the feet of strangers before blessing dignitaries, and with every gesture the roar becomes clearer. Wake up. God is not a theory. He is living love that is seeking you. Not all of it have understood. Some see him as radical, others as naive. But he does not look for approval. Seek to awaken. because in times of comfortable silence, the roar of the lion is more necessary than ever. And have you already, did you hear? We live in an age of excess. Never in the human history we have had so much access to the information, comfort, entertainment, smartphones, artificial intelligence, deliveries in minutes. We have everything, or so it seems, and yet more and more people are waking up with a silent question in the chest. Why do I feel so empty? Pope Leo XIV did it called with a disturbing term, an epidemic of silent despair. It doesn't scream. It doesn't cause scandal. It hides behind smiles on social media, behind busy schedules, behind happy selfies. But it's there, eating away from within. In one of his speeches, the Pope did not speak of politics or economics. He spoke of broken souls, of a humanity that runs but does not know where it is goes, from young with titles but no purpose, of successful adults but emotionally overwhelmed, of old people who look back and ask themselves, was that all? The real poverty of today, he said, is not the lack of bread, but the lack of meaning, and has reason. Statistics say so confirm. The rates of anxiety and depression are at historic levels. Suicides in rich countries, they exceed those from war zones. And the most tragic thing, they no longer expect anything. They have lost the capacity for wonder, for faith, for deep desire. It's a generation hyper-connected, but spiritually disconnected. Leo XIV does not condemn the modernity, use a smartphone, appreciate the science, values the advances, but he warns that none of that full, deepest hollow of the soul. That place only can be inhabited by the eternal. In a private interview, he recounted the story of a young businessman millionaire who looked for crying. I have everything, he said, but I don't want to live more. Every morning I wake up and I don't know why. I won, and still so I'm empty. The Pope did it, looked with compassion, and only he replied, "You were never created to have, you were created to love." And that phrase sums up his diagnosis of the modern world. We confuse plenitude with accumulation, but the soul doesn't feed on things. It feeds on relationships, on purpose, on real love. He proposes a radical alternative. No more anesthetizing the soul with stimuli. No more running without course. It's time to stop, to look inside, to allow the silence to speak, because in that silence, he says, whispers truths that no algorithm can offer. And if you listen with attention, you will discover that the hunger you feel is not for something, it's for someone. Who are you when nobody sees you? Who are you when the title falls, when his mirror no longer flatters, when everything goes out? For Pope Leo XIV, the deepest crisis of modern humanity is not economic, nor technological, nor not even moral. It is an identity crisis, a fatal forgetfulness. We have stopped knowing us children. We are beloved children of God, he says, with a trembling voice, and we have forgotten. We live in an age of disguises. We change our personalities like clothes. We build profiles, personal brands, digital avatars, but in the intimate, in what is not shared, invades us the suspects that it's all a lie, because what the soul yearns for is not approval, but belonging. And in that forgetfulness, according to the Pope, is born the modern angst. It's as if we were princes who, after a spell, they think they are beggars, as if we had access to the throne. But we prefer the leftovers. We seek gratification snapshots, he says, because we no longer remember the eternal joy. In one of his most memorable homilies, he paused for a long time. He closed the eyes, and then, with a firm voice, he uttered a phrase that shook millions. The enemy does not need to destroy you. All it takes is for you to forget who you are, and has reason. Because whoever forgets that he is a child of God falls easily in the trap of living as a slave, of success, of the judgment foreign, of the fear, of sin, of senseless consumption. It is an oversight that is not noticed in the external, but bleeding inside. The Pope told the case of a woman who, after many years away from the church, him confessed crying, "They taught me to obey, to fear, to do things, but they never told me I was loved." And he replied, "Then you have not yet been introduced to the true God. Because when one discovers that his true identity is not in what it does, nor in what it achieves, nor in as shines, but in what is beloved child, desired, embraced by God, everything changes. And it's not just a poetic phrase, it's a transformative truth. From that place, you don't need to compete or prove or please. You can simply be, breathe, love without fear, forgive without limits, living without masks. The Pope shouts it from the depths of his being. Remember who you are. Remember where you come from. Remember toward where you go. You are loved with a love that cannot be measured, nor is it exhausted. Maybe that's why the world runs so much, because it doesn't want to stop and face the emptiness of its oblivion. But that emptiness is not your condemnation. It is your sign. An inner voice whispering, "Come home. The Father is waiting for you." No few things hurt as much as being hurt by those who they should take care of you. Pope Leo XIV does not hesitate to say, "The Church has failed when has prioritized the control over the compassion, the law on love, the judgment on the mercy." And those words were not received with applause from all sides, but they were necessary. Because behind the full temples and solemn liturgies, there is millions of people were hurt. People who came looking for comfort and found coldness. They came with questions, and they received condemnations. They needed a hug and were confronted with rules. The Pope knows it, has seen. As a bishop, he heard confessions of those who turned away, not because of hatred for God, but because they did not feel worthy, because they felt rejected. And each one of them said it same, "If they didn't show you the love of Christ was not the gospel what you received." On a visit to a prison, a prisoner asked, "Do you believe you who still I have salvation?" And the Pope, visibly moved, he knelt before him. He took her by the hand and replied, "Yes, the you have. Jesus loved you before you were born, and it has not I regret doing it. Because that is the internal wound that bleeds the most, when God's representatives forget act as children of God, when preaching the sky, but he refuses he hug. Leo XIV does not deny the need for the truth of the doctrine of the order, but he insists, if all that does not lead to love, it has become an idol. And then he returns to the gospel, to the image of the Christ who did not avoid sinners, but dined with they, that he did not humiliate the adulteress, but that he defended, that he did not impose, but rather attracted with fierce tenderness. One of the moments more strong of his pontificate was during a mass with religious people. He interrupted the homily, left the prepared text aside, and said, "Let them, I ask, in name of Christ, let them not do of the gospel a stone to be thrown. Make it a bread that is broken and shared." And that phrase, like many others, has become an echo of its mission, because he doesn't want a powerful church. He wants a maternal church, one that embraces the doubter, one that waits for the lost, one that walks with the one who stumbles, because that was the Church of Christ. The greatest, the scandal, he said, is not that the world doesn't believe, it's that we haven't shown that God is love. And that is why his reform begins in he heart, not in the documents, not in the titles, in he heart, because that's where the gospel becomes flesh or turns to smoke. There are truths that are heard so many times that they become worn out, phrases that we repeat without chewing, as if they were liturgical ornaments. But when Pope Leo XIV spoke these words, they were not theology, were live fire. God doesn't just love, God is love, it said in silence, with the eyes wet, as if that truth, so brief, contained the entire universe, and for him, it is not a theoretical definition nor a catechetical formula. It is an experience, a revelation that, if truly understood, disarms the soul and rebuilds. He told the story of an 8-year-old girl, years old, terminally ill with cancer. He, the visited secretly, without cameras. He sat down next to her, took his fragile little hand, and asked tenderly, "Do you have fear?" She said, looked, smiled, and he said, "No, Father. Jesus is going to hold me tighter." There. He couldn't contain the tears. In that little girl, small and dying, saw a faith more alive than in many theologians. She knew something we forgot, he said, after, that there is no need to earn the love of God. Already it have. Because if God is love, then everything changes. It is not a distant judge waiting for you to fail. He is not a watcher of errors. He is not a sin counter. He is a source inexhaustible tenderness, who never stops loving you neither a second, even when you already gave up for lost. And that transforms everything. Because many people live with an image distorted of God. They see him as demanding, distant, punishing, and the Pope confronts him with strength. We have preached a God who is scary. When Christ died to show us a God who embraces, he remembered also the words of St. John, "He who does not love has not known God." And he added, "So how do we pretend to evangelize without loving? How speak about God if we do not speak from love?" In an intimate homily in a forgotten parish, he improvised, "Perhaps you've heard all your life that God loves you. But today I wanted you hear differently. God loved you when you fell. God loved you when you ignored it. God loves you now, even if you doubt him." And that one message had begun to touch hardened hearts, to open rusty doors, to illuminate dark corners. Because when you understand that God is love, you stop living to avoid punishment, and you start living to respond to that love. Already it's not about complying, it's about loving as we were loved, forgiving as we were, forgiven, from embracing as we were hugged. That truth, so ancient, so simple, so powerful, can change the world. And it begins changing you. It is not a structural reform. It is not a change of doctrine. It is not a new document. What Pope Leo XIV proposes is much more radical, a revolution of the heart, because nothing will change outside if it doesn't change inside first. In one of his most talked-about addresses, the Pope addressed everyone, lay, religious, skeptics, with a single phrase that disarmed defenses. "I didn't come to convince you. I came to remind you that you are loved." And that is the core of his revolution. For centuries, many souls were evangelized through the fear of hell, fear of sin, fear of divine punishment. But the Pope proposes a powerful alternative, tenderness as a spiritual path. It is not about denying the truth, he explains. It's about proclaiming it from love. Because if the gospel does not liberate, so we have not understood Christ. This revolution of the heart is not an emotional utopia. It is a concrete, painful, profound transformation. It involves unlearning. It involves leaving behind images distorted from God. It involves healing wounds spiritual that we carry from the childhood. The Pope meets with frequency the parable of the prodigal son, but he from a new perspective, not as a moral lesson, but as a mirror of the soul. We are all that son, he says, but we are also all called to be the father who embraces. And during a vigil with young people, the Pope asked a moment of silence, and then, looking straight into the camera, said, "Maybe the problem is not that you don't believe in God, but you do not believe that he believes in you." And there it is, heart of the revolution, not about theories. It's about allowing God's love to do the work. What only love can do, transform from within, heal without violence, rebuild without impose, convert not with guilt, but with compassion. That's why the Pope insisted on an incarnated spirituality. It's not enough to pray. We must touch the wounded. It's not enough to know. We must love. It's not enough to talk about God. We must reflect it. This revolution already began. In it invisible, in the everyday, in confessions where there are more tears than words, in reunions between parents and children, in communities that open their doors without asking for credentials. And you're invited. Don't need to be perfect. nor have answers. Only you need to open the heart, because that is the revolution that the Pope is igniting all over the world, a soft but unstoppable flame. And if you allow it to burn within you, you will discover that God's love is not a shelter. It is a fire that transforms. A revolution without foundation, it vanishes. Therefore, Pope Leo XIV did not remain alone in words. He presented to the world a clear, courageous, and deeply spiritual plan, 5 pillars for a new evangelization, not about strategic methods, nor about campaigns digital. They are paths of the soul, simple routes, but capable of renewing hearts, families, and entire communities. 1. Personal encounter with Christ. Without a real encounter with Jesus, everything is religious ideology, the Pope affirms. This encounter is not a ritual, nor a custom. It is a living, intimate, transformative experience. Leo XIV insists that every believer has to have a face-to-face moment, even if it is in silence, in loneliness, in tears. Because Christianity is not born from a theory, but from a meeting with a living person. 2. Mercy incarnate in concrete actions. Love is not enough, feel it. You have to translate it in gestures, he says firmly. Therefore, one of the fundamental pillars is to live the faith through concrete works of mercy, visiting the sick, listening to the suffering, feeding the hungry, forgiving the offender. Evangelization, according to the Pope, must become with dirty hands of service, not from the distance from the pulpit. 3. Beauty as a path toward the eternal. Beauty is a way in which God touches our soul without asking permission, and Leo XIV has promoted art, music, nature as legitimate avenues of encounter with the divine. He often quotes Dostoevsky, "Beauty will save the world. A painting, a melody, a sunset can open doors spiritual where arguments fail." 4. Dialogue with the dilemmas of the modern world. Far from condemning thought contemporary, the Pope proposes, listen to it, understand it, dialogue. I am not afraid of science, he says. I fear a faith that doesn't want to think. Therefore, he calls the Christians to talk about bioethics, technology, suffering, ecology, not from dogma, but from a mature, open faith, embodied in the reality, authentic joy as a sign of the kingdom. No one converts by seeing sad faces, he says with a smile. Joy true, not superficial or forced, is one of the most powerful testimonies of the gospel. The Pope asks communities to laugh, to sing, to celebrate life, because constant sadness contradicts the core of the good news that we are loved forever. These 5 pillars are not ideals far away. They are doors open. Anyone can begin today. And in that walk, new, the Church ceases to be an institution, to become home, because when the gospel is lived like this, it no longer needs to be explained. It's felt, it's breathed, it's contagious. It was not in a cathedral. It wasn't during a mass solemn. It was in a small prison, away from the cameras and the big headlines. There, behind bars, Pope Leo XIV knelt before a group of inmates, many of them atheists, others Muslims, some guilty of crimes terrible, and them washed feet one by one. Didn't say much. He just whispered, Jesus would do, this is for you. That image gave the around the world. But more than a gesture, it was a declaration of principles. This Pope does not want thrones, he wants towels. He doesn't want power, he wants service. Does not want admiration, wants to imitate Christ. And that moment sums up his entire pontificate. The faith is not a theory, it is a commitment. The Church is not to dominate, but to serve. God is not any darling judging, is kneeling in the earth, washing dirty feet. Since its election, Leo XIV was clear, I did not come to govern. I came to serve with a heart of Christ, and that service does not have limits. It's for everyone, without distinction, without conditions. In his words, finals before the papal blessing, elevated the eyes and said something that still resounds. Pray for me, not because I'm not Pope, but because I'm a sinner, like you. That humility is not false modesty. It is the strength that gives he knowing that you are loved. Because whoever knows that God loves him embraces no need to fake perfection. And now, the question is for you, that you will do with all this. Will you let it be a more video, a story that moves you for a few minutes and then is forgotten? Or will you allow this truth to burn inside you, to bother you, to awaken you? Because it's not just about the Pope, it's about you, it's about us, about every soul who has forgotten that they are a daughter, about every wound that still bleeds from not feeling loved. Leo XIV doesn't want applause, he wants witnesses, men and women who live gospel in the skin, in the gestures, in the street. Let them wash their feet, let them listen, let them love, without expecting anything. And you can be one of them, because you don't need to know much. You just need to remember this. You were loved before you had name, and what you follow being now same. If this story touched your heart, share it, because maybe someone just today needs to hear that God has not given up on him. And if still doubts, if you still don't know if this is for you, just do one thing. Close the eyes, take a deep breath, and listen. You may not hear anything anymore, or you may start to hear the roar of the lion.